My name is Arthur, and for 45 years, I was a mechanic. There's a certain honesty to that kind of work. A car either runs or it doesn't. You can't talk your way out of a faulty engine. You have to get your hands dirty and fix it. My hands are a testament to that life. The skin is thick, crisscrossed with a map of old cuts and permanent grease stains under the nails that no amount of scrubbing can ever fully remove. I was always proud of them. They were the hands that put food on the table, that paid for school books, that held my wife Clara's hand until the day she passed. They were the hands that built our home, board by board, nail by nail, on a piece of land her own father had given us. A good man, my father-in-law. He understood the value of solid ground. After Clara was gone, the house felt too big, too quiet. But it was my anchor. Every corner held a memory. Every scuff on the floor told a story. My two children, Daniel and Sarah, were grown and had lives of their own. Sarah, my youngest, was a nurse, practical and kind, with a heart as steady as her mother's. Daniel, my son, was different. He was the ambitious one, the one who always seemed to be reaching for something just beyond his grasp. He became a lawyer, married a woman named Jessica from a family with serious money, the Hendersons, and polished away every rough edge of his upbringing until he gleamed. I was proud of his success, of course. A father wants his children to have more than he did. But I saw the way he looked at me sometimes, at my work clothes, at the chipped paint on my old truck. It was a look of gentle, pained embarrassment. He was ashamed of his roots, of the very soil he'd sprung from. He loved me, I believe, but it was a love complicated by his own insecurities. He wanted the Hendersons' world, a world of country clubs and hushed conversations about stock portfolios, a world where a man with grease under his fingernails was an unfortunate anecdote from a distant past. The beginning of the end came with a birthday. My granddaughter Lily, Daniel and Jessica's first child, was turning 1. Daniel called me, his voice full of a manufactured excitement that never quite reached his eyes. He wanted to throw a big party for her. Not at his own sterile, modern mansion in the suburbs, but at my house. It has such a wonderful, rustic charm, Dad, he'd said. Jessica's parents will adore it. It's so authentic. It was a word a rich person used to describe something a poor person simply called life. He wanted it to be perfect, a showcase. He talked about caterers and a string quartet. To do my part, to make the day special for Lily, I took a significant portion of my savings, money I'd set aside for a new roof, and poured it into the backyard. I resodded the lawn until it was a perfect green carpet. I built a new stone patio by hand, laying each flagstone myself, my knees aching at the end of each day. I planted rose bushes, Clara's favorite, all along the fence. The place looked like a park. I did it for Lily, and I did it because a part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, thought that maybe Daniel would see the work and remember the man who taught him how to hold a hammer. The day of the party was sunny and warm. Cars I'd only ever seen in magazines lined our little street. The Hendersons arrived, Richard and Eleanor, looking impossibly elegant. They surveyed my home with the polite curiosity of tourists visiting a historical reenactment. I felt like an exhibit. I smiled, shook hands, and tried to feel like the patriarch of the family, the owner of the home, but I felt more like the groundskeeper. The moment that broke me didn't come with a thunderclap. It was a quiet, almost casual conversation. I was standing near the new rose bushes, refilling a pitcher of lemonade, when Richard Henderson clapped my son on the shoulder. He gestured around at the yard, at the house. "Daniel, you've done a magnificent job with this place," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "It's a fantastic investment. Good bones." Here it was. The moment for my son to say, "My dad did all this. He built this house. He just redid this whole yard," a moment for a simple acknowledgement. For the truth. But Daniel just smiled, a broad, confident smile that didn't belong on his face. He puffed out his chest. "Thanks, Richard," he said, his voice loud enough for several people to hear. It took a lot of work to get the place in my name and fix it up properly. A real project. In my name. The words weren't just words. They were stones. They hit me, one by one, right in the chest. He hadn't just taken credit for the flowers and the patio. He had taken credit for my entire life's work. He had claimed my home, my history. As his own personal project, I stood there, pitcher in hand, feeling the blood drain from my face. I felt the world tilt slightly, the cheerful chatter of the party turning into a dull, meaningless roar. He had erased me. With a few casual words, he had made me a ghost at my own granddaughter's party. It got worse. Later, as the party was winding down and the light was turning golden, I was inside, looking for a box for the leftover cake. The kitchen window was open, and I heard Daniel talking to Jessica out on the patio, their voices low and confidential. "I'm just so relieved it's all sorted," he was saying. "The lawyer finally got the deed transfer finalized last week. Dad's name is officially off it. It's fully ours now. No more complications, no inheritance issues. It's clean." A shard of ice slid into my heart. It wasn't just a boast to his father-in-law. It was a calculated act. He had gone behind my back, used his legal knowledge, and had me sign papers I probably hadn't fully understood, likely buried in a stack of other financial documents he'd been helping me with, to legally strip me of my own home. The home I had built for his mother. The home where he had taken his first steps. A complication, that's what I was. A loose end he needed to tie up. I didn't confront him. What would have been the point? To cause a scene? To have his wife and her family watch as a broken old man shouted at their brilliant son-in-law? I couldn't give him that satisfaction. My dignity was all I had left, and I clutched it to my chest like a life raft. I stayed composed. I smiled at the departing guests, accepted their compliments on the lovely party, and even helped carry the mountain of presents out to their cars. I played with Lily, letting her tiny fingers wrap around my thumb, and felt a profound sadness that this little girl was being raised by a man who saw family as a transaction. Externally, I was a calm sea. Internally, a volcano was burning. The feeling of betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt like a physical illness. I felt invisible, as if my very substance was fading away. I had lived my whole life for my children, sacrificed every spare dollar and every spare hour for their betterment. And for what? To be edited out of my own story like a stray sentence. After everyone had gone, and the house was a wreck of paper plates and half-empty glasses, my daughter Sarah found me sitting on the back steps, just staring at the stone patio I had built. She came and sat beside me, not saying anything for a long time. The silence between us was comfortable, a shared space where words weren't always necessary. Finally, she put her hand on my arm. "Dad," she said softly. I was in the kitchen. I heard what Daniel said to Mr. Henderson. She paused, her grip tightening slightly. He had no right. That wasn't right. Her words were a balm on a raw wound. They didn't fix anything, but they made me feel seen. They confirmed I wasn't crazy, that the injustice I felt was real. I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She understood. She had always understood. Later that night, long after Sarah had gone home, I couldn't sleep. The house felt alien to me, the walls closing in. I went out to my workshop, my sanctuary, the one place that still felt like mine. The smell of sawdust and oil was comforting. I switched on the single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling and pulled out an old cardboard tube from a dusty shelf. I unrolled the contents onto my workbench, the original blueprints for the house. My own handwriting was there in the margins, notes and measurements scribbled down 35 years ago. Then I opened a heavy metal lockbox where I kept my most important papers. I shuffled past Clara's birth certificate, our marriage license, and there it was. It was a separate document, older and more yellowed than the others. It was the deed for the land. Clara's father, a wise old farmer, hadn't given us a house. He had gifted us the plot of earth itself, a half-acre of solid, dependable ground. And he had put it in my name only. A man needs his own ground to stand on. Arthur, he'd told me. Daniel, in his slick, corporate cleverness, had transferred the title to the structure, the house that sat on the land. But he had either forgotten about, or never known about, the separate deed for the land itself. He had stolen the building, but I still owned the foundation. In that moment, under the quiet hum of the bare bulb, I knew exactly what I had to do. My response would not be an emotional outburst. It would be a quiet, deliberate, and final act of correction. The engine was faulty. It was time to fix it. The following Monday, I didn't call Daniel. I didn't call Sarah. I put on my best shirt, the one I saved for holidays, and took a bus downtown. I met with a lawyer, a man named Peterson whose office was on the second floor of an old brick building. He was my age, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He wasn't slick. He was solid. I laid the documents on his desk, the blueprints, my bank statement showing the withdrawal for the garden renovations, and the old, yellow deed to the land. I explained the situation calmly and factually. He listened without interruption, his expression growing more grim with each sentence. When I finished, he looked at the land deed, then back at me. "Mr. Arthur," he said, "your son may own the house, but you own the ground it's sitting on. You are well within your rights to sell your property." My next stop was a small real estate office run by a man who was an old friend of a friend. I told him the situation as well. He knew the area. He told me a large development corporation had been buying up parcels on my street for months, planning a new, upscale condominium complex. They had been trying to get that last half acre, my half acre, to complete their project. He made a call right there in his office. Things moved faster than I could have imagined. The corporation wasn't just interested, they were desperate. They made an offer that was staggering. It was more money than I had ever seen or dreamed of. It was life-changing money. The real estate agent looked at me, his eyebrows raised. "Arthur, this is a phenomenal offer. You should take it." I thought of Daniel's smug smile. I thought of the word complication. I thought of my wife Clara and the rose bushes I'd planted for her. And I said, "I'll take it." We signed the papers. The deal was done. The land, my land, was sold. The contract stipulated that the new owners would take possession in 60 days, and that they had full rights to demolish any existing structures on the property to prepare for their new construction. I went home and sat on my back steps, looking at the stone patio. For the first time in a long time, the air felt light in my lungs. I waited a day, just to let the decision settle, to make sure it was resolve and not anger guiding me. It was resolve. The next afternoon, I picked up the phone and dialed my son's number. He answered with his clipped, important-sounding, "Daniel speaking." "Daniel, it's your father," I said. My voice was steady. "Dad, everything okay?" he asked, a hint of impatience in his tone. He was probably in the middle of a very important legal brief. "I'm fine, son," I said. "I just thought you should know that I've sold my land. The plot the house is on. The new owners will be taking possession in 60 days. They informed me they plan to demolish the existing structure to make way for a new development." I said it all in one breath, calmly, as if reporting the weather. There was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears in his brain grinding to a halt, trying to process the information. "What?" he finally whispered. "What did you say?" "I sold the land, Daniel." I repeated, slowly and clearly. "The 60-day notice is a courtesy. I thought you and Jessica would want to make arrangements for the house." The explosion came, as I knew it would. It was a torrent of disbelief, rage, and panic. "You can't do that. The house is in my name." "I have the deed," he yelled into the phone. "You have the deed to the house, Daniel," I said quietly. "But you forgot about the land." "The land was always mine." I heard a choked sound, a gasp of fury and realization. Then I said, "Goodbye, son," and I hung up the phone. The reversal was complete. The house was his, but the ground beneath his feet was gone. It took him less than an hour to arrive. His expensive car screeched to a halt in my driveway, and he stormed into the house without knocking, his face a mask of purple rage. Jessica was with him, looking pale and horrified. "What have you done?" he screamed, his voice echoing in the quiet living room. "Are you out of your mind? This is my home. My family's home. Lily's home. It was my home first." I replied, my voice never rising. I was sitting in my old armchair, the one Clara had always loved. I felt strangely calm, detached from his storm. He started pacing, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "This is insane. This is vindictive. You did this just to get back at me, to embarrass me in front of Jessica's family. You're trying to ruin my life because you're jealous of my success." The accusations poured out of him, each one designed to wound, to shift the blame. He was painting me as a senile, bitter old man lashing out in a fit of pique. I let him exhaust himself. When he finally stopped, breathing heavily and glaring at me, I looked at him, really looked at him. I didn't see a powerful lawyer. I saw a scared little boy who had been caught. "Daniel," I said, and my voice was soft but carried the weight of 45 years of hard work. "A house is just wood and nails and glass. The foundation, the real foundation of a home, is built out of respect. You took my name off the house because I was a complication you tried to erase me. I didn't think you'd miss a house that was built on such a weak foundation." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. For the first time, he had no legal argument, no clever retort. There was only the simple, devastating truth. Jessica started to cry softly. "The decision is final," I said, rising from my chair. "The sale is legal and binding. You have 60 days, and with that, I turned and walked into my workshop, closing the door behind me, leaving him standing in the middle of a house that no longer had a future. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Sarah was my rock. When I told her everything, she didn't judge. She just hugged me and said, "It's time you started living for yourself." Dad, her husband, Tom, a good, solid man who worked in construction, came over with his truck. He looked at me with a quiet admiration. "Arthur," he said while we were loading my workbench, "respect is everything. You did what any man with dignity would do." Their validation was a quiet comfort, reinforcing the rightness of my decision. With a part of the money from the sale, I found a small, bright apartment in a quiet complex across town, one with a garage I could convert into a new workshop. Old neighbors heard what had happened, and they didn't see me as a vindictive old fool. They saw a man who had stood up for himself. They would stop by, shake my hand, and share a quiet word of support. I needed a new purpose. Sitting around counting money held no appeal for me. The money was a tool, not a destination. I used a good portion of it to rent a small commercial space near my new apartment. I filled it with tools, some old, some new, and put a sign in the window, "The Tradesman's Corner." Community workshop. I started offering free classes for young people in the neighborhood, teaching them basic mechanics, woodworking, how to fix things with their own two hands. I wanted to pass on something real, something tangible. The feeling of watching a teenager's face light up after they successfully rebuild a small engine was more satisfying than any amount of money. On the wall of my new workshop, I hung just one thing in a frame. It wasn't a picture or a certificate. It was the original deed to the land, the one from Clara's father, its edges yellow and brittle. It was my constant reminder of what true ownership means. It isn't about a name on a piece of paper. It's about the value you build, the legacy you inherit, and the ground you refuse to surrender. News of Daniel's life trickled back to me through Sarah, who never offered it with any glee, only with sadness. His world was unraveling. The Hendersons were furious, not about the loss of the house, but about the public humiliation of it all. The story of how their clever son-in-law had been outmaneuvered by his blue-collar father was apparently making the rounds in their social circle. The strain on his marriage to Jessica was immense. Without the charming house and with his pride in tatters, he was facing a social and financial freefall. Months later, he showed up at my new apartment unannounced. He looked smaller, diminished. The expensive suit was rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He stood in my doorway, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Dad," he started, his voice thick. I'm sorry. I know I messed everything up," but then the apology soured. It quickly turned into a litany of his problems. "Jessica and I, we're having a hard time. Her parents. It's a mess. I don't know what to do. I was wondering if you could maybe help me out? Alone, just to get back on my feet." He still didn't get it. He saw the solution as money, the very thing that had corrupted his values in the first place. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a deep, profound pity. I shook my head slowly. "Money can't fix this, Daniel," I said. I went to my toolbox and took out a heavy, worn claw hammer, its wooden handle smooth from years of use. I held it out to him. "This built a home once," I told him. "Go build something real. Start with respect for the foundation." He stared at the hammer as if it were a foreign object, then at me, his eyes filled with a fresh wave of confusion and hurt. He didn't take it. He just turned and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. But about a week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a single sheet of notepaper with a few lines of his handwriting, the first I'd seen in years. It wasn't an apology letter filled with excuses. It was a confession. It said, "Dad, I am sorry I erased you. I was wrong, that was all. No requests, no justifications." It was the first crack in the wall of pride he had built around himself, a tiny glimmer of the son I once knew. It was a start. My life found a new rhythm. I was at peace in my small apartment, happy in my bustling workshop. I no longer woke up with that heavy feeling of being unseen. I wasn't waiting for an apology or for Daniel to make things right. I had already made them right for myself. My worth was not tied to his success or his approval. It was in the sawdust on my floor, in the hum of the lathe, in the grateful faces of the young people I was teaching. Sarah brought her children, my grandchildren, over every weekend. My grandson, Tom, a serious little boy of 8, loved my workshop. One Saturday, he was helping me sand a small block of pine wood, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and full of absolute faith. "Grandpa," he said, "you can fix anything, can't you?" In that moment, I felt a validation so pure and powerful it eclipsed everything else. That was my legacy. That was my truth. Even Lily, Daniel's daughter, still came to see me. Jessica would bring her, quietly, sometimes. The connection with that little girl, the one for whom this whole painful chapter began, remained unbroken. I've learned that a man's life is like a tree. You can't reach for the sun if you are ashamed of the soil you came from. The roots are your history, your truth. If you sever them, you can't stand tall, and you will eventually wither. My son tried to sever his roots, and he lost his footing. I had to sell the ground beneath him for him to finally look down and realize he was standing on nothing. Now, my own foundation is solid. It's not made of earth or concrete, but of self-respect, earned with my own 2 hands. I have found my voice, not in shouting, but in the quiet confidence of my work. I have my place in the world, a place I built myself, twice. And I am finally, completely, at peace.